"Don't even think about coming to the engagement," my mom snapped. "I don't want your face ruining a single photo." That night, my sister texted me, "Maybe if you weren't so pathetic, you'd be worth inviting." I just smiled, canceled the venue they couldn't stop bragging about, and watched the dream engagement dissolve in front of my eyes. I, 32M, never thought my own mother would look me dead in the eye and tell me I wasn't worth a photograph. But there she was, standing in my childhood kitchen, her voice cutting through me like glass when she snapped that I shouldn't even think about coming to my sister's engagement party because my face would ruin every single photo. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about some family disagreement or sibling rivalry. This was about 15 years of being treated like the family disappointment while my sister basked in golden child status. My sister had always been the star. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect everything. Meanwhile, I'd struggled through college, worked multiple jobs to support myself, and somehow still ended up being the one who wasn't good enough for family photos. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. She'd written that maybe if I wasn't so pathetic, I'd actually be worth inviting to important events. The message came through around midnight, probably after she'd been drinking and celebrating with her friends about her upcoming engagement party. I stared at that text for a long time. Something shifted inside me, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I'd finally reached my breaking point, and I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. See, there was something my family didn't know about me. Something I'd been keeping quiet because I'd learned early on that sharing good news only invited comparisons and criticisms. 3 years ago, I'd started a small consulting business. It had grown slowly but steadily, and last year I'd made enough to buy a small property management company. One of the properties I now owned was the boutique event venue downtown that my sister had been bragging about booking for months. The same venue she'd posted about on social media, calling it her dream location. The same venue my mother had been telling everyone about, describing how exclusive and expensive it was. I'd bought the building 6 months ago as an investment, but I'd kept the same management company running it to avoid any complications. The irony wasn't lost on me that my sister had unknowingly booked her perfect engagement party at a venue owned by her pathetic brother. The next morning, I called the venue manager and asked for a meeting. I explained that I needed to review all upcoming bookings for a property assessment. When we got to my sister's reservation, I asked about the contract details. The booking was solid, paid in full, scheduled for next Saturday. Everything looked perfect on paper. But as the property owner, I had certain rights outlined in the original purchase agreement, including the ability to cancel events for property maintenance or safety concerns. I spent the next few days thinking about what I wanted to do. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about years of being pushed aside, dismissed, and treated like I didn't matter. This was about my mother looking at me with disgust and my sister calling me pathetic when I'd actually built something they knew nothing about. On Wednesday, I made the call. I informed the venue manager that we needed to schedule emergency electrical work for the weekend due to safety concerns I discovered during my property inspection. The work would require the entire venue to be shut down from Friday through Monday. The manager protested, explaining about the engagement party, but I reminded him that safety came first and that we'd need to refund the booking immediately. He agreed to handle the cancellation and refund process. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. My phone started ringing around 2 in the afternoon. First my sister, then my mother, both calling back to back. I let them go to voicemail. My sister's message was frantic. She explained that the venue had just called to cancel their booking due to emergency maintenance. She was panicking because the party was in 3 days and everywhere else was booked. She actually asked if I could help somehow, if I knew anyone in the event planning business. My mother's message was different. She was angry, demanding to know if I had somehow sabotaged the booking. She'd apparently put 2 and 2 together and realized that the cancellation came right after our argument. She accused me of being vindictive and petty. I called them back that evening. I told my sister I was sorry to hear about the venue cancellation, but I didn't know anyone who could help on such short notice. She broke down on the phone, explaining how this was supposed to be perfect, how she'd already told everyone about this amazing venue, how humiliated she'd be if they had to cancel or move the party to someone's backyard. When I talked to my mother, I kept my voice calm and reasonable. I asked her why she thought I would have anything to do with a venue cancellation when I'd already been uninvited from the party. I pointed out that it didn't make sense for me to sabotage something I wasn't even allowed to attend. She backed down slightly, but I could hear the suspicion in her voice. She asked if I was sure I didn't know anything about it. I told her I was as surprised as anyone that these things sometimes happen with older buildings and electrical systems. By Thursday, the panic had set in completely. My sister had called every venue, restaurant, and event space within 50 miles. Everything was booked, too expensive, or couldn't accommodate their guest list on such short notice. My mother called me again, this time with a different tone. She explained that they were desperate and asked if I might know of any available spaces. She even suggested that maybe I could help them contact the venue to see if the electrical work could be postponed. I told her I'd make some calls and see what I could find out. Of course, I already knew the electrical work was completely fictional, but I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. That afternoon, I called the venue manager back. I explained that I'd had a change of heart about the electrical work and that we could postpone it for a few weeks if there were any important bookings that weekend. He was confused but relieved and immediately offered to call my sister back to reinstate the booking. I told him to wait. I had a different idea. I called my sister directly and told her I'd managed to contact someone at the venue. I explained that the electrical work could potentially be postponed, but it would require the property owner's approval, and he was apparently very particular about his tenants and their events. She begged me to help her get in touch with this mysterious property owner. She promised she'd make it worth my while, that she'd never forget this favor. I told her I'd need to think about it. After all, the property owner might want some kind of guarantee that this would be a respectful, high-class event. He might want to meet the people involved, make sure they were the kind of tenants who would treat his property well. My sister agreed to anything. She said she'd meet with anyone, sign any additional contracts, pay any extra fees. She was desperate. That's when I told her the property owner might be willing to meet with her and our parents on Friday evening to discuss reinstating the booking. I suggested they come prepared to explain why their event was so important and why they deserved a second chance at using such an exclusive venue. She agreed immediately and asked where they should meet. I told her the property owner preferred to meet at his office, which happened to be at the venue itself. I'd arranged for them to meet him there at 7 o'clock Friday evening. Friday came, and I spent the day preparing for what would either be the most satisfying moment of my life or a complete disaster. I dressed in my best suit, arrived at the venue early, and briefed the manager on what was about to happen. At exactly 7 o'clock, my family's car pulled into the parking lot. I watched through the window as my parents and sister walked toward the entrance, all dressed up and carrying a folder of what looked like documents and photos, probably trying to prove how worthy they were of this venue. The manager met them at the door and escorted them to the main event space, where I was waiting in one of the chairs, reviewing some property documents. The look on their faces when they saw me sitting there was worth every moment of the past few days. My mother's expression went from confusion to recognition to something approaching horror. My sister just stared, her mouth slightly open. I stood up and introduced myself as the property owner they'd come to meet. I explained that I'd been looking forward to discussing their event and understanding why it was so important that they be allowed to use my venue. My mother was the first to find her voice. She demanded to know what kind of game I was playing and how I'd managed to orchestrate this whole situation. I told her it wasn't a game at all. I explained that I'd bought this property as a business investment and that I took all bookings seriously. Their event had been canceled due to what I'd initially thought were necessary safety concerns, but I was now reconsidering that decision. My sister finally spoke up, asking if I was really the owner of the venue she'd booked for her engagement party. I confirmed that I was, and explained that I'd been in property management for several years now. The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had as a family. For the first time in my adult life, my mother and sister were asking me questions about my work, my success, my business decisions. They wanted to know how long I'd owned the building, how many properties I managed, how successful my company was. I answered their questions honestly. I told them about starting my consulting business, about the slow growth, about eventually being able to invest in real estate. I explained that I'd been quiet about my success because I'd learned that sharing good news in our family often led to criticism or demands for financial help. My sister asked why I'd let them book the venue without telling them I owned it. I reminded her that when she'd made the booking, we were still talking regularly. It was only recently that I'd been told I wasn't welcome at family events and that my presence would ruin photographs. My mother's face changed as she realized what I was getting at. She asked if I'd canceled the booking because of what she'd said about not wanting me at the engagement party. I told her that the cancellation had been a business decision based on property maintenance needs. However, I was now in a position to reconsider that decision, but I needed to understand what kind of event this was going to be and who would be attending. My sister quickly jumped in, explaining how important this engagement party was to her, how she'd already invited 50 people, how much it meant to celebrate this milestone in her life. She talked about her fiancé and their future plans, about how this party was supposed to be the perfect beginning to their wedding preparations. I listened to everything she said, then asked her a simple question. I wanted to know if this was the kind of event where all family members would be welcome, or if there would be restrictions on who could attend based on their appearance in photographs. The room went quiet. My mother and sister exchanged glances, and I could see them both understanding exactly what I was asking. My mother was the one who finally spoke. She told me she owed me an apology for what she'd said earlier in the week. She admitted that she'd been stressed about party planning and had said things she didn't mean. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I needed to understand if it was genuine or if it was just because she now knew I owned something she needed. My sister broke down at that point. She started crying and admitted that they'd both been terrible to me over the years. She said she'd always been jealous that I seemed to handle criticism and disappointment so well, when inside she was constantly worried about living up to everyone's expectations. She explained that calling me pathetic had been her way of dealing with her own insecurities, but she realized how cruel and unfair that had been. I sat there listening to both of them apologize and explain their behavior. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of the family dynamics that had brought us to this point. I told them I'd reinstate their venue booking, but I had some conditions. First, I wanted a genuine apology, not just words motivated by needing something from me. Second, I wanted to be invited to the engagement party as a welcomed family member, not as someone whose presence was merely tolerated. Third, I wanted them to understand that I'd built a successful business and deserved the same respect they'd give to any other accomplished person in their lives. They both agreed immediately. My sister asked if I'd be willing to bring a date to the party, and my mother suggested that maybe I could even give a speech if I wanted to. I told them I'd think about it. Update 1. The engagement party happened last Saturday, and it was surreal being there as both a family member and the property owner. I decided not to bring a date or give a speech, but I did attend, and for the first time in years, I felt like an actual part of the family rather than an obligation. My sister made a point of introducing me to her fiancé and his family as her brother, who owned the venue. She seemed genuinely proud rather than embarrassed, which was a new experience for both of us. My mother spent most of the evening asking me about my business and my plans for expanding the property management company. She admitted she'd had no idea how well I was doing and asked why I'd never told them about my success. I explained that I'd learned to keep my achievements quiet because previous celebrations had often turned into criticism or suggestions about what I should be doing differently. She seemed to understand and promised to be more supportive going forward. The party itself was beautiful. My sister looked happy, and her fiancé seemed like a good person. For the first time in years, I could see why she'd wanted everything to be perfect. But the real test came the next week. Update 2. 3 days after the engagement party, my mother called me with what she called an exciting opportunity. She explained that my sister's future mother-in-law had been very impressed with the venue and wanted to book it for her own daughter's wedding in 6 months. My mother suggested that since we were family, I could probably offer them a substantial discount on the venue rental. I told her I'd need to think about it and check my booking calendar. Later that day, my sister texted me asking if I could also help her book the venue for her actual wedding reception next year, and whether there might be a family rate available. I realized that nothing had really changed. They were still looking at me as someone who could provide them with things they wanted. Just now they were being nicer about asking. I called them both and explained that my business was separate from our family relationships. If they wanted to book my venue for future events, they'd need to go through the same booking process as any other customer and pay standard rates. My sister was disappointed but said she understood. My mother was less gracious about it and suggested that family should help family when possible. I told her I agreed completely, which is why I'd reinstated their engagement party booking despite being uninvited from it originally. But going forward, Business would be business and family would be family. Update 3. It's been 2 months since the engagement party, and things have settled into a new normal with my family. My sister and I talk regularly now, and she's made an effort to include me in wedding planning discussions and family events. My mother still occasionally makes comments about how I should use my success to help family members, but she's learned to back down when I remind her that respect goes both ways. The most interesting development has been with extended family and family friends who attended the engagement party. Word has spread about my property management business, and I've actually gained several new clients through referrals from that night. My sister did end up booking my venue for her wedding reception next year, but she went through the proper channels and paid full price. She told me she wanted to do it the right way and prove that she valued both our family relationship and my professional success. I've learned something important through all of this. The revenge I thought I wanted wasn't really about making them suffer or embarrassing them. It was about finally being seen and respected for who I am and what I've accomplished. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to accept being treated poorly and having the power to change the dynamic when people realize they've underestimated you. Looking back, I'm glad I owned that venue. Not because it gave me leverage over my family, but because it forced us all to confront how we'd been treating each other. Sometimes it takes a crisis to make people realize what they've been taking for granted. My relationship with my family isn't perfect now, but it's honest in a way it never was before. And that's worth more than any revenge I could have planned.